It's at our meeting yesterday. That's not the truth. On the contrary, we confirmed the targets. Of course, by 30%. I've been informed that the media today, or at least some of them, report that we have stepped back from these targets at our meeting yesterday. That's not the truth. On the contrary, we confirmed the targets. Of course, we have discussed instruments, ways and means to achieve the targets, but I would like to stress we stick to the targets. And that's our approach, binding targets for reductions in emissions. On the American side, we need a strong in a global agreement. And to be more specific, I do hope that the major economies could agree on a long-term target for reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. For instance, a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. If the major economies could agree on that, it would be a valuable input to a global agreement in Copenhagen. But we need American leadership in that respect. So both the American side and the European side have responsibilities to ensure a global agreement in Copenhagen in 2009.
Jim Steinberg, what do you think? Is it possible
to get it enacted by the Senate to get past the 60%? The climate will change, if I can use the word, once there's a new president. But getting that consensus and building it in the Congress to not only have the long-term goal, which is important, but to actually think about the mechanisms that would have teeth in the United States have to go together. And I would hope that we would find a strategy that both recognizes the importance of a long-term goal, but actually provides the bridge that gets us to that with the kinds of actions that we need to take now, and that can have the domestic support that they need to have in the United States. Because as everybody has recognized, if the United States doesn't actually do this, the rest of it isn't going to matter very much.
Next question.
We have spent already about $40 billion on research. We have now committed another $40 billion in loan guarantees for research and development and deployment. We have just adopted the most sweeping energy legislation ever adopted by anybody, much more aggressive than what Europe is even now contemplating, taking to its own on transportation, taking to its own council and parliament. This gets no press. We are now being criticized in the United States by the Democrats. Bush is, our president, for not going unilaterally by himself further than Congress let him go with the energy bill, because Congress didn't give him what he wants, and he's now being criticized for this. We have done a great deal. The stereotype is very, very hard to correct, but I do think we are on a track. We have mandatory limits in 8 sectors, including transportation, which are going to be very hard for us to meet, and they are certainly, I think, the equivalent of anything Europe can do over the course of the next 2 years. And I'm sorry to be a little impassioned about this, but we have sung for our supper.
Okay, thank you very much. You wanted to say, to ask something. Is somebody here? Yeah.
To talk to the American people about this issue, because I think there is broad support for it. I think that the next president needs a mandate to take significant action. And if they don't talk about it in the campaign, even though they may have the best of intentions, I think it'll be much harder to get the American people and the Congress together to take the kind of difficult decisions that are necessary. But I think if we do have that dialogue, and I think we have a good chance to because of the positions of the candidates, that we'll be ready come January of 2009 for a new president to identify that as a top priority for his or her administration, to convene the leadership of Congress, to move this forward, to work with enlightened leaders like Jim Rogers.
Electricity, and I think another important figure is 70% of Duke's power is generated in coal power plants. Your company is one of the biggest CO2 emitters within the United States. But on the other hand, at the same time, you are a leading member of the U.S. Climate Action Partnership.
Of all the companies in the world, we're the 12th largest emitter of CO2. And if we were a country of the 192 in the United Nations, we would rank 41st. I share that with you not to brag. I share that with you to let you know how daunting the assignment is for us to address this issue. and at the same time provide affordable, reliable electricity to our customers as their demand grows in the future. But recognizing that as a problem, I have come to and going forward, and that's another conversation. But I believe that we need to act now because it took us 100 years to get here. It's going to take us many decades to move forward, and that we need to take action now. And one of the reasons that we were a founding member in USCAP, and USCAP...
Next question, please.
My name is Arvid Torvik. I represent Statoil Hydro, a fairly major oil and gas company, so I have to join the polluters. I don't have the exact figures for our company, Jim, but I'm sure we're right up there with you. If we had this discussion a couple of years ago, we would still be discussing, is it an issue, and have we caused it, and so on. And I think it's heartening to hear that we're now actually starting to talk about solutions, even though there's a little bit of blame throwing back and forth across the Atlantic. But I would like to touch on two questions.
Together to make this a reality. My hope is that from a private company's perspective, that we go to work while the world leaders are debating how best to do this, that we go to work and invest in energy efficiency. We encourage our governments to invest in research and development, recognizing that those are two things that we can do today to reduce our carbon footprint and be able to cross this bridge to a low-carbon world. So I think there's a role for us to play. Also, and important, and even in the United States, while we don't have the great record of Denmark, if you look back over the bridge to a low-carbon world, if we could find a way on carbon capture and sequestration. In the U.S., 50% of our electricity comes from coal. That would make a huge difference, and particularly in the context of the Chinese.
Involved in the Kyoto negotiations, that the fact that, at least in its initial terms, Kyoto excluded the developing countries was going to be...
It's also a very important part of our endeavors. So I don't think we disagree at the end of the day.
And back here for Sovereign Wealth at 11:30. We got a great lineup.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Basis of those principles of free trade, flexible exchange rates, free flow of capital across, shift their assets around quickly in times of stress. But as you said, Gideon, they are now growing to both a size and number that I think vigilance is required. Vigilance to ensure they continue to be the positive force in the global macroeconomy that they have been, but vigilant also to make sure that those concerns that I think people could rightly have do not lead to investment protectionism. And that's why we, all of us here on the panel,
discussions on sovereign wealth funds. As Bob Kemi said, these funds were around us for many years, but recently they have been in the front page of newspapers, of the media, of our discussions. Why they have been in the front page during the last months? I think because the Chinese new institution started to invest in some Western companies. This is, I think, the most important factor that has helped to this discussion becoming one of the most important ones. The Commission started working...
should be, whether we should have any specific concern. And what we felt happening in discussions with our Parliament was that there was a lot of emotion in this discussion. There was a lot of not so rational fear and concern that had to, that in a way is all you can bring it all back in a way to the fact that in a world full of uncertainty and quickly changing economic circumstances, people want something to hold on to. They want something to be sure of. And here, a lot of things that they thought they were sure of were changing. Things that they thought they were national suddenly were no longer. And in order to try to cool that discussion down and try to get...
Here's the bank where everybody deals with them, whether they're a client or an owner. So the interdependence in the market means when there's a fund out there helping or bailing out or investing as an opportunity, it is not just about an opportunity. We are all actually are impacted by global markets today. So we can't afford to have a fallout somewhere.
Mr. Ammonier. Just two brief comments. First of all, about reciprocity.
Market, when other pools of capital were... I'd like to take two sort of threads.
Context, just as you stated. And as Philip mentioned, the speech, okay? But so the bank can play this role has not been encouraging. So if you have certain people elected, I think
as we sort of heard this afternoon, power is flowing a little bit from west to east. Javier on this one a bit as well.
My major concern is that the tenor of the debate in Europe is raising expectations, regardless of who the next president is, that overlooks a range of interests that I think both parties in the United States would pursue, and also some ideologies, if you would, they will pursue, and that those heightened expectations will inevitably have to be adjusted. And so, you know, it of course depends to different theories about sort of banking and financial markets. The reality is that the institutions that got in this trouble will pay a price. Some of them won't be around. And a lot of people will have lost jobs. People may debate what that says about compensation systems. That's sort of another question. The subprime mortgage market. It would certainly appear to me that financial regulators and supervisors should have been more active in trying to limit some of these products. Having said that, just recognize those products were also getting more people into homes too, and so it's not so easy to always say, you know, what would be your requirement. And this can be a tremendous benefit. So I guess I wouldn't, at the same time that I personally think that financial markets are going to go through a difficult period, and some additional lessons and supervision will be appropriate, I wouldn't go so far as to try to stop or slow down the world of innovation in financial markets. I don't think you'll be successful, and I don't think it would be good for people. There's tremendous amount, you know, if you think about the advantages that people have now in terms of access to finance and credit, whether it be microcredit or domestic currency bond markets, we need to bring this to the developing world, not try to stymie it.
Well, I'd like to say, on behalf of everyone, thank you.
Counterintuitive point. It may very well be the case that it should move beyond Americans and Europeans. But going back to this issue of American isolationism, which I'm sometimes concerned about, just people have to think very carefully about whether they really want what they ask for. Because if you start to detach the U.S. further from those institutions, it will have an effect. Secondly, and again, I'm too close to this.
They talk to each other very much. They say they coordinate either between themselves terribly much or with the security forces. Now, Afghanistan was part about China, that, you know, we want China to be a responsible stakeholder. Now,
Resources, and we need a certain intellectual agility to be able to do that. It serves the interests of the global system. And, you know, I've been sort of in a sense, a cottage industry of mine doing this, whether it be Sudan or North